take you to the university where we find our reporter Nasiphi Same. Nasiphi, good morning. On the back of what has been described as shocking by many, what is the atmosphere on the ground this morning?
Well, from what I'm telling, obviously, tensions have indeed simmered down, and it does look like business as usual. But I mean, obviously, students cannot forget that viral video that we woke up to on Monday morning of a white student urinating on the personal belongings of another student. I mean, Twitter, or rather social media, was up in arms following that video, including the students on the ground, and management was then forced to address the students, including SRC, on the particular matter in regards to the investigation itself and the suspension. But as you can hear, from the two interviews that were done by Newzroom Afrika yesterday, there is a growing call to expel the perpetrator. And I am joined by Viwe, who's the SRC chairperson. Viwe, thank you so much for your time. It does kind of look like business as usual and normality has been restored, but this particular, residence, the Hayes Marius, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, has been, or rather there have been a number of complaints in regards to it. Talk to us about that.
Thank you so much. So Hayes Marius is a residence that has been implicated before in allegations of a lot of different things, including GBV in different forms, racism, queerphobia, just general harm and threat towards students who are different to the accepted norm in terms of identities that they want in that community. I think one thing I do just want to say is I think this is the one case where business as usual, for lack of a better word, is we accept. I mean, we're heading towards the exam season right now, and this cannot be the energy that students take into these exams, especially students of color. This is a very traumatic and a harmful incident that occurred, and we want to ensure that we can support the student as much as we can and make our students feel safe as much as we can so that they can succeed academically. First and foremost, that's our priority here as students. We're here to study, we're here to get our degrees, and I really do hope that students are able to put this in the back of their minds enough to focus on their academics while we keep an eye on the incident and while we keep an eye on the outcomes that we're awaiting.
And this particular residence, Viwe, we do understand that initially they did not want to take first-year students, and the person, or rather the victim, is a first-year student.
Yes, so last year, Hayes Marius did not receive any newcomers because of the toxic culture, because of the nature of the residents. The university decided that it needed to reform, it needed to transform, and it needed to prove to the university and to the student body that it wanted to be a part of the Stellenbosch that is working towards a progressive vision, Vision 2040. So they were not allowed to get newcomers in hopes that the senior students would focus on reforming and would essentially complete certain tasks in order to show that they have reformed and they are serious about transformation. They then did receive newcomers, I think, in the following year, and so it's just very, very disappointing to find ourselves in this situation where as soon as they received newcomers, this is what happens. That this is how they treat each other, and that this is what is an accepted norm in that community.
What do you think should be happening in that community? I mean, you speak about some of the issues that have plagued that particular community that has ultimately led to the residents not receiving a first-year student.
I think the SRC has been clear now in that we need to revisit the conversation of disbanding the residents. I think the roots of these issues run far deeper than we think, and it seems like we're not going to be able to chop the tree off. We have to uproot it entirely. So the structure of the res needs to be relooked, the composition of the res needs to be relooked, the leadership in the res needs to be relooked. It really needs to be an actual physical transformation and not just a demographic transformation, not just something that's superficial.
I mean, going to the perpetrator now, Viwe, he has apologized. There is a video of him apologizing, and we are still getting those, calls, or growing calls rather, for him to be expelled. Do you think that maybe his apology is sufficient?
Not at all. I mean, this is a human rights violation, and I think the context of Stellenbosch, the context of our country is such that we all know we cannot allow an apology to be the only form of action against something of this magnitude. I think there needs to be very serious consequences. This is a message that is going to be sent to the rest of the country by the university and to the student body by the university, how seriously they take human rights violations and how seriously they take forms of discrimination. If we truly are a zero-tolerant campus or institution, it needs to show in the consequences of the actions of the student.
Viwe, there's been a number of, racist incidents or racism incidents linked to this particular institution. I mean, in 2015, there was a documentary, Leicester, where it was speaking to, students of color at this institution regarding some instances that, or rather racism instances that they've experienced, including, a thesis by one of a master's student here titled Lived Experiences of Hidden Racism of Students of Color at a historically white university. What do you make out of the institution's pace in terms of having a transformation policy and a more inclusive one, that is?
I think the SRC welcomed the progression towards a transformation policy. It's something that we're excited about. I think for a very long time what's been lacking has been actual ownership and accountability for transformation, knowing exactly who's going to be responsible for what, and if you don't abide by particular guidelines and regulations set out by the institution, how non-compliance is dealt with. So I think this is something that we're going to see be manifested through this policy. And I really do think that we are going to see some form of ownership being taken by the different, RCs in our institution, by the faculties, by student leaders. And I hope that it is going to be a more assertive shift towards transformation and a more, I think just a more intentional move towards transformation and not something that's superficial and performative.
Thank you so much, Viwe, there. I think we'll have to leave it there. Viwe, the SRC chairperson, obviously giving us an update in regards to that viral video that we saw on Monday morning into the afternoon and evening, and Stellenbosch itself responding to that video, the institution, in regards to what actions they're going to take. And we're now hearing from Viwe that they are, as the student body, including students themselves, as much as they are moving towards exams and a sense of normality has been restored, they are looking for accountability, and that growing call for the perpetrator to be expelled seems to be also growing.
Nasiphi, certainly one of the key takeaways from that conversation you were having is that do not chop the tree, but that analogy of actually uprooting the tree in order to deal with some of those challenges that Stellenbosch University is facing. But before we let you go, the authorities have obviously called for any witnesses to come forward. Do we have an idea of the timelines on how long it's going to take for them to deal with this situation?
Can you repeat that question for me?
Do we have any timelines from the authorities on how long it's going to take for them to deal with this situation in relation to the perpetrator that we are talking about?
Well, fortunately for us, we do also have the institution that we are going to be speaking to the institution just after 10 o'clock in that regards, in terms of giving us a time frame. But I do think it is important, as we heard from Viwe now, that, the students are moving towards the direction of exams that are starting on Monday, and is now a time for them to focus on their academics. So it will be important for the institution itself to give time frames in regards to dealing with this particular matter. As we do know, there is someone that was at the receiving end of this entire ordeal, and as much as from what we understand, as much as he's okay, he has been indeed traumatized following that incident that occurred in the early hours of Sunday morning, where a student broke into his residence, into his safe space, and urinated on his personal belongings. So you can imagine how he is he's feeling, and the fact that he does want this to be attended to speedily, and also, you know, for a very favorable outcome in regards to the alleged perpetrator, who we now know has been suspended. However, many are calling for him to be expelled, including the victim himself.